I still remember the day I received the invitation like it was yesterday. It was a simple white card with no return address, just a single sentence typed on a plain black background. Join us for a night of spiritual awakening. I had always been fascinated by the Kabbalah, spending countless hours studying its ancient texts and seeking guidance from online forums. The idea of a group meeting to discuss these sacred teachings was too enticing to resist. I felt an inexplicable sense of excitement as I read the words, like they were meant for me alone. The invitation included a map with a single location marked, an abandoned train station on the outskirts of town. I arrived at the station early, my heart racing with anticipation. As I entered the dimly lit platform, I saw a group of people gathered around a lone figure in a long black coat. He introduced himself as Rabbi Elazar, and his eyes seemed to bore into my soul as he spoke. "Welcome, seeker of truth," he said. "Tonight, we embark on a journey into the very heart of the Kabbalistic universe." The group began to discuss the intricacies of the Tree of Life, their voices hushed and reverent. I felt like an outsider, yet at the same time I was drawn in by their conviction. As the night wore on, the discussion became more heated, with some members expressing concerns about the group's true intentions. But Rabbi Elazar silenced them with a wave of his hand, his eyes flashing with an otherworldly intensity. "We are not here to debate," he said. "We are here to connect." And with that, the meeting ended, and we were left standing alone in the darkness, the only sound the distant hum of a train rumbling through the night. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Rabbi Elazar's words had left an indelible mark on my mind. The meeting at the train station seemed like a mere prelude to something much larger. As I walked home, lost in thought, I stumbled upon a small, unassuming bookshop tucked away between two towering buildings. The sign above the door read Mystic Tomes, and the windows were filled with an assortment of ancient-looking volumes that seemed to lean inwards, as if sharing secrets. I felt an inexplicable pull towards the shop, like it was calling out to me. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old parchment and dust. The proprietor, a bespectacled man named Ezra, greeted me warmly and asked how he could assist. I mentioned Rabbi Elazar's meeting, and his expression changed from curiosity to concern. "Be careful, my friend," he said, his voice low and urgent. "There are those who would seek to exploit the Kabbalah for their own gain." He rummaged through a nearby shelf, producing a slim volume bound in black leather. "This is a rare text, one that speaks of the hidden pathways within the Tree of Life," he explained, his eyes darting around the room as if checking for unseen listeners. "Some say it holds the secrets of the ancient sages." As I opened the book, a shiver ran down my spine. The pages were blank except for a single phrase scrawled in red ink. "The path to true knowledge begins where shadows dance." I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off about Ezra's words. As I left the bookshop, I felt a sense of unease that lingered long after I'd walked away from the building. That night, as I lay in bed, my mind began to wander back to Rabbi Elazar and his enigmatic words. "The path to true knowledge begins where shadows dance." I tried to push the phrase aside, but it seemed to sear itself into my brain like a branding iron. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a presence in my room watching me. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but as the hours ticked by, the feeling grew stronger. It was as if someone was standing beside my bed, their breath cold against my skin. I sat up with a start, my heart racing, and that's when I saw it, a shadowy figure looming in the corner of my room. Its features were indistinct, but its presence seemed to fill the space around me like a palpable mist. I tried to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. The figure began to move towards me, its pace glacial and deliberate. I felt my heart slow down, as if it too were being pulled into some dark, abyssal void. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the shadow vanished. The room was bathed in an eerie silence, except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. I lay there, frozen with fear, as the darkness seemed to coalesce around me like a living thing. I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had settled over me since the previous night's encounter with the shadowy figure. It was as if something was watching me from just beyond the edge of perception. I tried to focus on my daily routine, but my mind kept wandering back to Rabbi Elazar and his enigmatic words. One evening, as I was walking home from work, I noticed a new neighbor moving into the apartment next door. He was an older man with sunken eyes and a gaunt face that seemed to be carved from stone. As he lugged his belongings up the stairs, I caught glimpses of him glancing out the window, his eyes fixed intently on my own apartment building. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized that he was staring at me. The next day, I saw him again, this time with a large stack of books and papers in his arms. He seemed to be studying the architecture of our building, poring over blueprints and diagrams like they were ancient texts. I began to wonder if there was more to this neighbor than met the eye. As the days passed, I noticed that he would often appear at my doorstep unannounced, bearing gifts of fruit or baked goods. His eyes seemed to hold a deep sadness, as if he had lost something precious in his past. And yet, despite his somber demeanor, there was an aura of quiet power about him that made me feel like I was in the presence of someone who knew secrets that I could only dream of uncovering. One evening, as we sat on my porch together, sipping tea and watching the stars twinkle to life above us, he turned to me with a look that made my blood run cold. "I have been waiting for you," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "You are a seeker of truth, like Rabbi Elazar." I felt a chill run down my spine as he leaned forward, his eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. "And I have information that will change everything." I felt like I was being pulled into a nightmare from which I couldn't awaken. The stranger's words had opened up a Pandora's box of questions and fears, and I didn't know if I was ready to face what lay ahead. But as we sat on my porch, the stars above us seemed to grow brighter, as if they too were drawing me into this dark world. The stranger leaned forward, his eyes blazing with an inner fire. "Come with me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I will show you the hidden paths of the Kabbalah." I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest, but something about his words resonated deep within me. It was as if I had finally found a doorway to a world that had been waiting just beyond the edge of my perception. Without thinking, I stood up and followed him into the night, our footsteps echoing through the deserted streets like a death knell. We walked for what felt like hours, the buildings around us growing taller and more twisted, as if they too were alive and watching us. The air grew thick with an otherworldly energy, like a palpable mist that clung to my skin. I could feel the weight of history bearing down upon me, the accumulated secrets and mysteries of centuries past. And then, suddenly, we arrived at a great stone door, adorned with symbols of ancient languages and forbidden knowledge. The stranger pushed it open, revealing a dark and winding staircase that plunged deep into the earth. "Welcome to the underworld," he said, his voice dripping with an almost fanatical enthusiasm. "Here, you will find the secrets of the Kabbalah." I hesitated for a moment, my heart screaming at me to turn back, but something about the stranger's words had awakened a part of me that was both brave and reckless. I took a deep breath and followed him down into the darkness, leaving behind the world above. I stepped onto the train without hesitation, following the stranger into the depths of the underworld. The car was dimly lit, with only a few flickering candles to light our way. I could feel the weight of the earth above me, pressing down on my chest like a physical force. The stranger led me to an empty seat in the back of the car, and I collapsed into it, feeling like I was at the edge of a precipice. As the train lurched forward, I felt myself being pulled into a world that was both familiar and yet completely alien. The scenery outside the window blurred together in a mad dance of hills and valleys, trees and cities, all spinning by with dizzying speed. I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the chaos, but it only seemed to seep into my dreams. When I opened them again, I saw that we had passed through some kind of tunnel or wormhole, and now we were hurtling through a world that was unlike anything I had ever seen. The sky was a deep purple, and the ground beneath us was covered in a thick layer of mist. Strange creatures darted across our path, their eyes glowing like lanterns in the dark. The air was filled with an otherworldly music, a melody that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I felt my grip on reality begin to slip, as if I was being pulled down into a sea of madness. And yet, despite the terror that gripped me, I couldn't help but feel drawn to this strange world. It was like a siren's call, beckoning me deeper into its depths. The stranger sat beside me, his eyes fixed on some point ahead. He didn't seem to be affected by the madness that surrounded us, and I wondered if he had been born for this world, or if it had somehow shaped him over time. As we hurtled through this strange landscape, I began to feel a sense of wonder creeping in, like a chill wind on a winter's night. Maybe this was what I had been searching for all along, the door to the unknown, the key to the secrets that lay beyond. I stepped out of the train and onto solid ground, my legs shaking beneath me. The stranger led me through winding streets lined with ancient synagogues, their walls covered in a labyrinth of symbols and markings that seemed to dance in the fading light. As we walked, I could feel the weight of history bearing down upon me, the whispers of countless generations past echoing through the air. Each synagogue we passed seemed to hold its own secrets, its walls whispering tales of love, loss, and redemption. The stranger stopped before a particularly ancient-looking building, its stone walls covered in moss and lichen. He pushed open the creaky door, revealing a dimly lit interior that seemed frozen in time. "This is the Temple of the Ancients," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Here, you will find the whispers of the past." As we stepped inside, I felt the air thicken with an otherworldly energy, like a palpable mist that clung to my skin. The stranger led me to a small shrine in the corner of the room, where a single candle burned brightly. He lit it from his own match, and the flame cast eerie shadows on the walls as he began to speak. "The whispers of the past are not just stories," he said, his voice weaving a spell of enchantment. "They are warnings, advice, and prophecies. They hold the secrets of our ancestors and the keys to our own destinies." As he spoke, I felt the walls around us come alive, the symbols and markings beginning to glow with a soft, ethereal light. The air was filled with whispers, a gentle susurrus that seemed to carry on the wind. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to be drawn into the sound, and suddenly I was transported to a world beyond time and space. I saw ancient rituals performed under the stars, and heard the words of wise sages who had come before me. I felt the weight of history bearing down upon me, but it was no longer crushing. Instead, it was a source of strength, a reminder that I was part of something far greater than myself. I felt myself being pulled down into a void that seemed to have no beginning or end. The stranger's words echoed in my mind as we descended deeper into the abyss. "The Sephirot are the gates of the soul, and those who dare to enter must be prepared to face their deepest fears." As we fell, the air grew colder and darker, until it seemed like a physical presence that pressed against my skin. I could feel the weight of my own psyche bearing down upon me, the shadows of my deepest doubts and fears rising up to confront me. The stranger's voice whispered in my ear, guiding me through the labyrinthine passages of the Sephiroth. "We are approaching Kether, the crown of the tree," he said. "Here, you will find the spark of creation, the source of all life." As we reached the topmost level of the Sephiroth, I felt a surge of energy course through my veins. It was like nothing I had ever experienced before, a pure, unadulterated joy that seemed to emanate from the very heart of existence. But it was short-lived, for as we began our descent into the next level, Malkuth, I felt myself being pulled down by an unseen force. The walls of the abyss seemed to close in around me, pressing in on all sides like a physical presence. I could feel my own soul fragmenting, breaking apart at the seams as the darkness closed in around me. "We are approaching Tifereth," the stranger whispered, his voice barely audible over the din of my own terror. "Here, you will find the balance and harmony that has eluded you for so long." As we reached the level of Tifereth, I felt a sense of calm wash over me, like a balm applied to my frazzled nerves. But it was short-lived, for as we began our descent into the next level, Jebura, I felt myself being pulled down once more. This time, however, I was not alone. A figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly intensity. "This is the aspect of severity and discipline," the stranger whispered, his voice dripping with an air of reverence. "Here, you will find the power to transform yourself into the very essence of your soul." As we descended deeper into the abyss of the Sephiroth, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The stranger seemed oblivious to my unease, his eyes fixed intently on some point ahead. But I knew what I saw, a presence lurking just beyond the edge of perception, its gaze piercing through the veil of reality. "The Watchers are always present," he whispered, as if reading my thoughts. "They are the guardians of the threshold, the keepers of the secrets that lie beyond." As we reached the level of Netzach, I saw them for the first time, a host of unseen Watchers, their faces twisted into grotesque grins as they watched us with cold, calculating eyes. They seemed to be made of the very darkness itself, their bodies shifting and flowing like living shadows. "These are the agents of the abyss," the stranger warned, his voice low and urgent. "They will stop at nothing to claim your soul." I felt a surge of fear as the Watchers closed in around us, their whispers growing louder and more urgent. They seemed to be speaking in a language that was both familiar and yet completely alien, their words echoing through my mind like a mantra of madness. "You are not who you think you are," they whispered. "Your soul is not what it seems." As the Watchers drew closer, I felt myself being pulled into their world, a realm of darkness and shadow, where the very fabric of reality was twisted and distorted. I knew that if I gave in to their whispers, I would lose myself forever in the abyss. I felt myself being pulled through a vortex of colors and lights, my mind reeling from the sheer intensity of the experience. The Watchers were everywhere, their faces twisted into grotesque grins as they laughed and jeered at me. I tried to scream, but my voice was lost in the cacophony of sound that surrounded me. The stranger's hand closed around mine, his grip like a vice as he pulled me through the veil of reality. We emerged on the other side, into a world that was both familiar and yet completely alien. The sky was a deep purple, and the trees seemed to twist and writhe like living things. I saw creatures moving in the shadows, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "This is the realm of the Qliphoth," the stranger whispered, his voice low and urgent. "Here, you will find the source of all darkness and evil." As we walked through this twisted landscape, I felt myself being drawn into a world of madness and terror. The watchers were everywhere, their whispers echoing through my mind like a mantra of despair. I knew that if I gave in to their power, I would be consumed by the very darkness that surrounded me. But it was too late for that now. We had crossed the veil and there was no turning back. The stranger's hand tightened around mine, his grip like a lifeline as he pulled me through the heart of the Qlifoth. And then everything went black. I slowly came to, my mind foggy and my body aching. The stranger was nowhere to be seen, but I was left alone in a desolate landscape of twisted metal and shattered glass. The air was thick with the stench of decay and corruption, and I could feel the weight of madness pressing down upon me. I stumbled forward, my legs trembling beneath me, as I tried to make sense of what had happened. But the more I looked around, the more my grip on reality began to slip. The world seemed to be melting around me, like a funhouse mirror reflecting distorted images of reality. I saw things that couldn't be real, creatures with multiple limbs and bulging eyes, their faces twisted into grotesque grins. I heard whispers in my ear, taunting me with cruel jokes and mocking me with cruel words. My mind was unraveling thread by thread as the forces of chaos and madness closed in around me. I stumbled through the wreckage of a city, searching for some shred of sanity to cling to. But every door I opened led only to more darkness, more despair. And then I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the horizon, its back turned to me. The stranger. He was walking away, leaving me to face the abyss alone. I stumbled after him, driven by a mix of desperation and madness. For in that moment, I knew that I would never be whole again. The unraveling of my sanity had begun, and there was no going back. As I stumbled after the stranger, I felt a sense of inevitability wash over me. We had reached the edge of a great precipice, and now we were staring into the abyss. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, like the presence of something that defied comprehension. I saw symbols etched into the rocks, pulsing with a malevolent power that seemed to be drawing us closer to some ancient, eldritch horror. The stranger's pace quickened, his footsteps echoing through the desolate landscape like the beating of a dark drum. I tried to follow him, but my legs felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot by some unseen force. And then we were upon it, a great, twisted monolith that seemed to be made of the very fabric of reality itself. The stranger reached out a hand and touched its surface, and I felt a jolt of electricity run through my body. "This is the threshold of return," he whispered, his voice like a rusty gate scraping against stone. "Here you will find the eternal return, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth that has been waiting for you since the dawn of time." As I watched, the monolith began to shift and writhe, its surface etching itself into my mind like a burning brand. I saw visions of ancient civilizations, of gods and goddesses that defied understanding, of worlds being born and dying in an eternal cycle of creation and destruction. And at the heart of it all, I saw the stranger, his eyes blazing with an otherworldly power, his face twisted into a grin that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. "Welcome home," he whispered, as the world around us dissolved into chaos.